Hey, how's it going? So here's another quick video. Maybe it'll be quick, maybe it'll be really long. I don't know. But I've got some notes here on my thoughts about Warzone. So I just was working on Warzone. I worked on Warzone for one and almost 1.5 years on Warzone as a gameplay engineer. I worked on a number of new game modes. So I built the mode called Exfiltration, which was not very popular, but eventually that mechanic did get rolled into a big event, which was a huge success, called the Destruction of Verdansk, where you needed to hold on to this bomb in order to explode Verdansk. So that was pretty cool. Um, and then I also worked on some other game modes, which are escaping me. I worked on Victory of Verdansk, which I think also went really well, and that public event system of having a new event every circle rolled into the event system that we're currently using for Vanguard Royale, which has been another mode that's been very well received by the community. And on top of that, I worked on a lot of little things here and there. So I did the majority of our Christmas content. I did pretty much everything except for Krampus. So I did the elves, I did the Christmas trees, and I did this content that was cut, so it was never released, so I can't talk about it. But I also worked on just like obviously a lot of little fixes, a lot of little bugs and stuff. And then I also worked on the new weapons which are coming out, but are already announced, which are the ice pick and the oh sorry, it's the ice pick and the pickaxe. I think, is that how I say it? Something like that. But both of them have the word pick in it, so it's a little confusing for me. But both of those or no, it's the throwing axe and the ice pick. That's what it is. Okay, so I worked on a lot of different things. Okay, so we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about all that. I also made a review about 2 years ago before I started working here. On Call of Duty Warzone, and I knew I was going to make that review because when you work at a company, you're not allowed to talk publicly about the game. So I knew I would get all my thoughts out in one place, and I made that video. It's got like 50 views, so you could check it out if you want to see how my views have evolved somewhat. But I just watched it, gave myself a refresher. So I'll talk about some of the issues that I had back then, and whether or not they resolved, or whether or not there's still issues today, 2 years later. Um, and what else will we talk about? Oh, and I just want to underscore, we're not going to talk about any trade secrets. We're going to talk about things that I'm allowed to talk about, okay? Things that have already been released. I made an awesome video that is a behind-the-scenes explanation of how I did a lot of the coding for the Christmas content that we put out. I created a really cool editor that allowed them to place the hidden gnomes all around Verdansk. And I took that to the community team, and they said, absolutely not, you cannot publish this. So they're very understanding, and I am totally understanding of their perspective too. So unfortunately, it just didn't get approved. So while I'd love to show you that really cool behind the scenes stuff of the tools I made, I'm not allowed to do that. So we're only going to be talking about stuff I'm allowed to talk about, stuff that is public information. And even then, I'm sure we could talk for hours about this game. So I originally reviewed this game at a 5 out of 5, which then I brought down to about a 4 out of 5, 4 stars out of 5 stars, just because there was a lot of technical issues and a lot of crashes, which were sort of the issues that I was facing at that time. And I'd say even today, the game holds up. I think it's still at a 5 out of 5 rating or a 4 out of 5 rating, depending on when you play it. Okay, because sometimes the game is super buggy, or there's a serious issue that's affecting the whole community, and you just cannot play the game. And then there's other times where everything is going smooth and it's feeling great. So I would say it often oscillates between those two. In my opinion, it's still my favorite battle royale on the market. Let me just turn off my heater there. It's still my favorite battle royale on the market. And I still really enjoy the game. I think it's a great game, and I'm really proud to have worked on it. So earlier, and I'll probably say this a few times, but earlier I mentioned some of the things I worked on, and I want to underscore, because not everybody's aware of this who may not work in the games industry, that I didn't work on any of those projects alone. A huge part of working in the games industry is collaboration, particularly in the role that I'm in, which is as a gameplay engineer. I'm sort of in between the coding and the design. So I often work with designers, both UI designers and game designers. And of course, I'm working with my fellow engineers as well. So it's an incredibly collaborative process. And anything that I worked on was not the product of my own volition and effort um, exclusively. It was always the product of a bunch of people coming together and, working as a team. And I have to say, this is one of the best teams I've ever worked on. It was an incredible pleasure to be there. I don't think I've ever seen that, without a doubt, this is the most like how do I say this? Like, this team gelled better than any team I've ever worked with within the engineering pod. So if I'm speaking specifically to the gameplay engineering team, I feel like there was a really amazing community that was fostered there, thanks to my manager and really everybody who's a participant of that. And I was extremely grateful of the privilege to have sort of joined, this team of what felt like friends, what felt like family. These were people who were still in contact with some of the people who had left the team, right? So one of our friends left because he went to work for a different studio, but he was still in close contact with I think some of the other members of the team. So it's definitely a lot of camaraderie there, and I felt very deeply that everybody on the team cared for each other. And I've never felt that exactly quite that way. So it really did seem like everybody within the gameplay engineering pod was heavily invested in helping each other succeed, and it was just a great collaborative environment to work within. And I would say the studio overall was just a really great studio to be in. It was a very collaborative studio. It was definitely a studio where you could feel comfortable approaching a creative director and telling him your opinion or something like that. I would say it and yeah, and there's a lot to talk about there, so we could unpack it. But let me try to keep to my schedule here, because we're already at 7 minutes. How did that happen? I'm gonna be talking about this game forever. Obviously, I spent over a year on it, so I could talk for you for hours about what a privilege it was to work on this amazing team. And then also, all the difficulties I had too, right? Because of course, it's not all smooth sailing. So we'll talk about that. So the first thing I wanted to do was talk about some of the issues in my old review and talk about if they were fixed. So there was a lot of one-off bugs that I think were fixed. But there was some things that I worked very deeply on, or hard on, but I wasn't able to fix them. So one of the biggest issues that I had from the very beginning was controller rebinding. So in other words, when you attack somebody in the game, maybe, this button is how you normally attack, but some people would prefer to use this button instead. So do you have the ability in this game to rebind the buttons to change how to do the input? And in this game, you don't. And that was a real pain in the ass when I was playing the game, because I felt the default controls did not accurately reflect what I wanted to do. And I got on the job, and that was one of the things I deliberately said, I wanted to fix this. I think it's an accessibility issue. I think it's a gameplay issue. And I just was not able to overcome the technical hurdle of getting that done, just because I don't think it was a resource priority. And this is something that I think is a little bit telling, just with respect to kind of where, how I felt about the project as a whole, which is that, you take a game like Fortnite, obviously a premier battle royale title. I think the #1 battle royale, if I'm not correct. I don't know, maybe it's what's that other game that came out recently? The one with the little dudes who push each other off. What's that called? I can't remember. The little fat guys who push each other. You definitely know what I'm talking about. I forget what the name of the game is. Wipeout? It's not called Wipeout. It's something like that. Oh, Fall Guys. That's what it's called. It's called Fall Guys. So maybe Fall Guys pushed them off the market or something. I doubt it. I'm pretty sure that when it comes to battle royales, Fortnite's still the #1. And Fortnite's team is incredible, right? I think it's best in class in our industry when it comes to this particular kind of game. I can't think of another team that rivals what Epic's doing right now. Certainly from a technical side. But it's incredible what they've been able to accomplish on a number of different factors, and we'll talk about that a bit, because I think it's important to refer to the #1 competitor when we're talking about any product for that matter. So yeah, Fortnite's definitely something that I'll talk about. I will say though that even in the studio, I don't think there was enough of an emphasis placed on the competitors. I think it's very important if you're making a certain kind of sauce for you to taste the other sauces on the market, and to see, okay, how is the flavor profile of the people changing, and I don't think there was enough prevalence put on engaging with sort of the other games that were in the market, and I think that's very important. So, and I apologize, I know I'm rambling here, but you guys love the stories, so that's why I tell you a story if I can think of one. Um, but even then, I think like, oh wow, like if Fortnite is doing something really great, then we should, like, some of the companies I've worked at, if a new game comes out, we will play the game together and we'll review it and we'll say, okay, what do we think? How does this compare to our game? And obviously you don't want to be so like a little, flaccid where you just change what your product direction is based on every new game that comes out, right? I'm sure we all know our favorite creative director who did that and wasted years of our lives. But you do want to look at what's coming out and say, is that interesting? Is that something that could impact how we do our design? Is that a way better way to solve the problem that we're trying to work on right now? And I don't feel like that happened enough, basically. I feel like the new game Super People came out, and I didn't think that there was enough people who were playing the other battle royales to get like some good competitive analysis. Um, and I think that was very frustrating for me. I think it's very important for you to look at the competitors. So I wish that there was something like a weekly roundtable where somebody would play a game and just give their thoughts or something like that. And maybe that's something that I could sponsor. I definitely tried to sponsor a number of the programs that I thought needed to happen. So I joined an interdisciplinary team from a bunch of different studios to help improve documentation, because documentation was a really big issue. So that's something that I tried to like stand up for. And then the other thing was I worked, and there was a few things like that, but I won't go into details. So anyways, yeah, I felt like there wasn't enough competitive analysis, and I think that's something that we should do more of. And yeah, okay, and I'm going to talk a bit more. So I didn't really even get to the point that I wanted to start with, which is how did my review change? So control binding was the first thing that I complained about, and ultimately, what the reason why I brought up Fortnite is because they have a lot of balls to go into their engine, really fuck with some shit, and then ship it out in the next product. And I didn't see that happening in Warzone a lot. Like, it was kind of like, oh, here's a threshold, and we need to get the game out of the door, right? The train is moving. So if it's gonna derail the train or it's gonna hold us up in some way, then we're not gonna do that big fix, even if it's gonna make a big difference, because it's just not worth the engineering effort right now, because we need to ship this game and we need to move through, right? And so controller rebinding fell into that pit. I think other things fell into that pit too. Now, I can't speak on this directly, but I think that, because I don't know. I frankly don't know whether or not it's going to be fixed in Warzone or something else, which is probably part of the problem. But I think the FOV slider for consoles is like a similar situation, where it's like you're fairly constrained by the hardware, and it's like you'd need to reconstruct a lot of things in order to get that to happen. So, if it comes out tomorrow, don't make me eat my words there. They may have been working on it in secret the whole time. But I think the reason why even 2 years later it hasn't been done, at least not yet. Again, it might be fixed tomorrow. I don't know. I can't speak on that. But I think the reason why that feature took a long time, or even like the controller rebinding isn't happening, I think the reason why that's why those features are either taking a long time or they're just never going to happen is because like the team is so focused and prioritized on like, okay, we got to get it out the next, we got to get the next version out. Whereas I think there's other teams that maybe have the engineering manpower or technical support to like actually take the train off the track, bring it to the train depot or whatever you want to use for this analogy, and like replace the wheels or something, right? Because you can't replace the wheels on a moving train. So I think that's kind of what my thoughts are on that. Like I felt like it was sort of underemphasized, some of these key things that I think needed to be fixed. Another issue that I think was like very key and like maybe wouldn't even be that hard to fix is the loot piles. So this is something I called out in my earlier review, but it's frequent that you'll kill somebody and then somebody else will die in that area, and suddenly you'll get a whole bunch of shit in one area, and then you'll try to pick something up, and you can't pick up the thing you want to pick up because like you can't fine tune point at it, so you wind up picking up the thing next to it by accident, and that's still an issue in the game today. And I think Fortnite has a really elegant solution where whenever things fall in Fortnite, they kind of spread out like water. Think about dropping a water bucket in Minecraft or something like that, right? It just spreads out. And like the loot does a good job of doing that. And I feel like that, I feel like that totally should have been done by now. So that was a little frustrating. What else? I think there's still, so again, this is going to sound a little negative. We're in a negative portion right now because I'm talking about stuff that still hasn't been fixed. But I want to underscore, the game's in a pretty good state, I think, relative to where it was. So a lot of stuff was fixed, but these are the stuff that wasn't fixed. So what was the other thing that came into my mind? Memorization issues. So this one definitely stuck out to me when I was playing the game. You constantly have to remember stuff. You have to remember how much does a loadout cost, right? It's 10K. Okay, maybe that's not so hard. But what about a UAV? I think that's like 4K. So it's sort of becomes difficult to remember all these different things. And then there's a lot of other memorization put on the player, such as what attachments do I have in my gun? What perks do I currently have active? I'm so frustrated that that still hasn't been fixed. And just a few more things like that. So that was frustrating that didn't get fixed. And that's all I have to say about that. The other thing was, I think there was some, and this is something I said from the beginning, and it's so funny because I just brought it up at a design meeting, not more than a month ago, but I think you should be able to customize your starter pistol. I think that was a real place where MTX dropped the ball, because I feel like I feel like pistols in the game are just generally useless unless you get them modded up to get like dual wield akimbo stuff. But like just the base ground loop pistol, like I don't think there's a single ground loop pistol that I'd pick up and like it'd be interesting or useful. So that was kind of always frustrating. So I feel like your starter pistol, you should be able to customize it in some way. So that was just a thought. And if, of course, everybody always thinks, oh, but what if they get shot out in the air? Well, if you don't want your players shooting each other out of the air from the initial drop, then maybe you fix that, right? Maybe you don't nerf the guns. So, I don't know, just a thought. It's interesting, too, because most Battle Royales, I think you don't drop with a gun at all. So it's kind of interesting that Call of Duty is different that way. But I think, honestly, the loadout drop system in Call of Duty is like one of the reasons why people love it so much. I think we should try to further emphasize it. So that's just my thought. What else? Oh, so there was a mini game in the original in Warzone in Verdansk where it would show you a picture and then you'd have to find the picture location on the map and that's where the intel would be located. And I love that. And this is something that I'll talk about later, but I feel like the game really benefits from having mini games inside of it, like little things that you could do in addition to killing people. So it was very frustrating to me that they removed that because I thought it was like an ever-present feature, but I guess it was just a one-off thing. But I would love to see more of that. And that's something I'll talk about a little bit later when we get to creative direction. So those are just some of my thoughts on the old review and how maybe some of the problems have been fixed, but some of them haven't been fixed, where the team has put its priority and where I think, some things like the technical debt of like the controller rebinding, maybe it would have made sense to fix that, right? I think with future projects being announced as they are, it's always a balance between, do we fix it in the current live product or do we invest our efforts into the next product? So it's a difficult balance, and I think it's always one which, we're trying to find, the right answer to, and maybe there isn't always a right answer, but I can appreciate the difficulty on the team there. So any one of those things I wouldn't have said like necessarily, oh, like this is something I totally would have done differently, because I can appreciate the technical debt and like the technical manpower it would take to like do something differently. But I would say that like the team was below my expectations with respect to some of those things, because I felt that, maybe it wouldn't make sense to do now, but given that, these are issues I brought up 2 years ago, it was very frustrating to me to look at this now 2 years later and to say, oh, okay, actually they're still not fixed. So yeah, that is frustrating for sure. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the management of the game. So this is sort of like the very high level production, slightly above the creative direction. So I guess the role would be the executive producer, and we actually changed executive producers like midway through the project. So that was interesting, right? Because everybody leads their team a little bit differently. I've gotten to serve under dozens of leaders and leads and managers and stuff in my career. So I've definitely seen how a lot of different people approach the problem of, building a game. But I think there's some places where I think we're still falling short with respect to how we approach game development. I think the number one issue facing Warzone right now, maybe, is it the number one? Yeah, I think I'm going to say it's the number one issue. I think the number one issue in development of this title right now is closing the loop with respect to data analytics. So I've worked on a number of live service games. I used to work in the free-to-play environment way back in the day on mobile games, right? I worked for Zynga, which is like the king, but I wasn't working on a mobile game there. But I think one of the things you'll notice about free-to-play developers is they know their metrics well, right? There's a lot of metrics. I mean, there's like every free-to-play developer worth their salt knows your 40-20-10, which is that if you're going to have your game succeed, you need to have your D1, D7, D30 DAUs retention, or sorry, your retention rate be I think 40%, 20%, 10%, right? Meaning 40% of the people who play your app today will play it tomorrow, 20% will play it next week, and 10% will play it next month, right? That's sort of the gold standard in order to like ship something that like, is the best of the best. But and all of that is just to say, like, there's a huge emphasis on analytics in the free-to-play space. And I feel like Warzone is not investing enough in empowering its personnel to use those metrics and to really think deeply about it. So let's talk a little bit about that. So, for example, I would make a feature and it would go out, or maybe a game mode, and I would get like very limited feedback with respect to how I could improve it. And that's very difficult, right? Because as a creative, somebody who's making work to be consumed, it's very important for me to understand how the public perceived it and whether or not it was good, right? Or in what ways was it good or bad? And it's very frustrating because I'm left with solely qualitative feedback in a lot of those areas. And I really would have appreciated more quantitative feedback. And I think the team was just very, well, I would say some members were just deliberately dismissive of, I think, those efforts. I remember I went to some people and I said, hey, I want to get the analytics on how my mode is performing. And they said, oh, it's not worth the effort. You're going to send that request to Central Tech at Activision, and they're never going to get back to you about how many people are playing your mode because they've got so many requests. And I kind of accepted that. But then, months later, I'm actually talking with the Central Tech team for documentation reasons for something else. And they're like, yeah, nobody's reaching out to us to request this data. So I'm like, fuck, this guy was totally wrong. Like, he told me no one was doing this request, and they want requests. Like, they want way more people to be requesting data so that they can provide more insights into the game. So that was so frustrating because it's like, man, like, I don't know what the hell's going on. Like, I don't know. I make a new gun. I don't know how many people are using the gun, right? And it's not to say the data's not being collected, because in many cases it is, but it's not a core part of the development cycle. There's a lot of features we'd create that would never get a post-mortem, or we'd get a post-mortem, but it would be a quarter later, like 3 months later, which, like, that's not actionable. Or at least maybe it is, right? But it's like the flywheel was moving at a snail's pace, right? You can imagine a hamster running around in a wheel. Okay, that's a productive team, right? Because you get the loop, you get the data, and then you iterate on it, and you say, oh, this mode was shit because of reason X, I'm going to fix it, right? Now I want you to imagine, instead of having a pet hamster, you got a pet snail running in a wheel. Oh man, that's pretty slow, right? They're probably not going to run the wheel very fast, right? And that's how it felt sometimes. It felt like, oh man, I made something and I can't learn from it until maybe 3 months later. So that was so frustrating, and I feel like it could be fixed. It could be fixed tomorrow, with the right emphasis. And I think that's an issue with executive production. And I think that could be fixed. So I'm hopeful. And I've met with some people who are very passionate about fixing it. So, I met with a teammate recently, and he had recently created a new feature, let's say, and he had been manually collecting the data because for whatever reason he couldn't get the graph set up, and he was just on his own graphing it in Excel and showing it to the team. And the team was like, "Holy shit, this is a great insight. This is really good to know," right? So I think that's the issue sometimes with working with a big company. It's like how do I say this? Like sometimes if you're working on a big company, you need to, how do I say this? Like sometimes there's a recipe and you say this needs more salt, and you go to the people and they say, no, this does not need more salt. It has enough salt. And you need to shove your elbow into the shaker and accidentally spill a bunch of salt into the soup, and then they will taste it and they'll be like, oh wow, this tastes delicious. You know what I mean? You need to like really get your fucking elbow in there. So I think sometimes you need to do that. And there was a bunch of times where that happened, right? Like one of the biggest modes that was a success for this team was the Iron Trials mode, which the streamers loved, the hardcore players loved, and that mode was, I'm pretty sure, explicitly not greenlit. That was one or two people who took it upon themselves to go out there and make some really cool shit and then show it off, and then, oh yeah, it needs more salt. You know what I mean? So that's annoying, but I think that's just politics. So maybe you're just always going to have those issues, but I felt like it definitely, like how do I say this? Like I think the team did a really good job of collecting quality of life ideas. Like there was one particular engineer who took it upon himself to like curate and collate some quality of life improvements for stuff that like was de facto an issue. But I think for some of the other stuff, like that you might ascribe to something like a new game mode like Iron Trials, like there wasn't really like I think the creative direction team did a really bad job of providing a runway for those ideas to reach success. It was not uncommon that there would be a group brainstorm where everybody would come together to think about an idea to fix a problem, and the key stakeholder for that idea wasn't present at the meeting. So, a great idea would get proposed, it'd get a ton of upvotes, it'd get approved. No, it'd get a ton of upvotes. It would get like that group support, and then it would never get approved, right? Or it would never get sanctioned for development. And so it was just the product of like, some very, driven people who would like go above and beyond and put in extra hours or what have you in order to like get those features out the door. And that was so frustrating because I've seen teams that have created very like collaborative like little nests where some really great ideas can grow, and I just feel like the creative direction like really failed to do that. And I think that's part of a creative direction issue, but I think it's also an executive production issue. I think it's mostly an executive production issue. So I talked a little bit about data, and I started getting to ideas, and I wasn't supposed to get to ideas yet, so forgive me for skipping ahead. But if I were to go back to data for a moment, I wanted to say that something that really made a difference in how I view data and how amazing it can be in terms of guiding the product is the philosophy that I saw at Facebook when I worked there. So Facebook did a really good job, I think, of putting an emphasis on the data and identifying guiding metrics that could be used to focus and determine how can we make the game better with respect to this guiding metric. And I think there's a great importance on finding the right metric and committing to it. And I just feel like metrics were just never part of the discussion. It was the current executive producer never brought a graph in front of us. The previous executive producer would do that a bunch of times. But again, it was just like daily active users, right? It was never something actionable like, all right, team, now 99% of users are using this sniper when it comes to sniper rifles. Why are they using only this sniper? We need to distribute that. We need to have a competitive play space for a number of different, like, it was never like, oh, let's pose a problem and let's fix it. It was always like, okay, here's what it is. So those are my thoughts on that. Okay, and then this is the last executive production issue, and this is a huge one. And it's that a lot of people on the team don't play the game. This, like, is really bad. And it's something that I've seen on a number of teams. I've expressed that, when I worked at Fortnite, I work with some engineers who basically said, like, oh, okay, we don't play the game. That's for QA, we make the game. And I couldn't agree with that sentiment less. I think it's totally wrong. And I think that it's very important for you to play the game in order to appreciate some of the issues. Even issues that only come up in the live environment. You need to play it so you can feel the frustrations, right? And I think that's just absolutely unacceptable. I think if I were leading that team, I would say, play the fucking game. You know what I mean? Like, maybe not every day. I don't think everybody needs to play the game every day, but I think everybody needs to play the game at least every week. And something that I've seen at other studios is they'll have maybe like the lead will play the game and other people will watch them play the game. You'll be in a group Zoom where maybe we can collectively talk about the game, right? And we could talk, because not everybody is good at playing the game. And so, if you suck at playing first-person shooters, to some degree, I think it would help to get better, right? So you should practice and you should get the experience of what it's like as a noob. Because, hey, that's good feedback too. And it's hard to get feedback as a noob if you're no longer a noob, because you don't know what the noobs are going to have an issue with. Noob meaning new player in that case. But I think even then, if you're a noob, watch an experienced player, Maybe once a week you go on and you watch like a live stream or something. I know there was a recent big debate in Silicon Valley because there was like DoorDash was requiring the engineers to do dashing so that they could get experience of what it's like to actually be a user of their product who has to transport groceries to, like, people who can't leave their house or whatever. And there was a lot of blowback, but I think that's so important. Like, I definitely think, and I think their requirement was like once a month, maybe you need to do it, and I think maybe with something like that, maybe it makes sense like once a quarter or something. But I think something as like frivolous as like, okay, play a game for 1 hour, I think you could do that every week. I think you could. So I was really disappointed to see that, because I think it's an issue. I think it's a serious issue. And because I've worked at teams where they don't play the game, and actually I will say every team I've worked on that has been a failure, like every team that has failed, they weren't playing the game. I can say that to you with 100% certainty. They were either playing a different game. Yeah, actually, in both cases, they were playing a different game when they could have been playing our game. And it's like, oh, wow, our own developers aren't playing our game. Maybe we should fix our game. Maybe why is that happening? I think that's always been an issue. Is there any other things I want to talk about there? I guess this is an executive production idea, but like, there's really serious build issues in this game, on this team. Like, it was not uncommon that for a week, maybe every other day, I couldn't work in the morning because my nightly build failed or some other tool crashed, and like now I'm stuck. And I think that was also an issue, like, of just, maybe a product of like working on a legacy tool, which like now doesn't have the same development priorities because people are working on, whatever's next. But that was really frustrating. Like, I think the build health, I could say this. I can say the build health was one of the worst build healths I've ever seen in the industry. It was horrible how frequently my tools just wouldn't work, or I just couldn't run the game. It crashed. Oh, this isn't working. We can't play test today because like, half the shit's broken. Oh, and there's no backup. I remember I was working on a mode, and it's like they tell me Tuesday, oh, the last version of the game that we have is last Thursday. So any work that you did Friday, Monday, Tuesday, it's not in the game yet. So do you want us to use that? And of course the answer was like, no, there's nothing for me to learn from back then because I needed to iterate, you know? And sometimes there is, but like that happened all the time. And it was frustrating every time. Um, okay. Other notes. I know we're going on half an hour here. There's a lot to talk about though. There is so much, and I care so deeply about this game and this team. I feel like there's so many ways that we could make it even better. You know, I think so. Here's some notes on creative direction. I think there was a few times where something was made from scratch, and I think if there was a lesson I could teach the team, it would be don't make it from scratch. Um, I think the cars handled way better in Verdansk than they did in the Pacific map, and I think that was a product of new cars being made from scratch, and it just seems so. Oh, hold on. Sorry, my girlfriend just got home, so I was saying hi to her. So what were we talking about? So yeah, don't make it from scratch. I think that was frustrating. Blah 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 blah. What else did I want to talk about? I think they're like I think that's like an issue. Like I don't think the team so the team is much smaller than like a team like Fortnite, right? Which is why I think it's so impressive that they can, punch um, you know, try to hold their own weight like against another team like that. Um I would have appreciated if there was more reused content. Like I think there was a big emphasis on like these big action set pieces of like, and I mean Fortnite has done this like really well where like on the launch of a new season they'll have a huge event or like this Travis Scott concert that I think will draw like millions of viewers. Um and I can understand, why Warzone like wants to fight them at that level, but I think that there's a lot of old content that doesn't get reused often enough in our game. Like I think there's a lot of guns that just are never used. And I would advocate for like huge expansions to like the loot pool so that you get a ton more different kind of guns in rotation. Like I wish it was a little bit more random in that sense. Right now when you go into a battle royale game, it's like maybe there's going to be like four different kinds of guns on the map, and then when you pick them up, like those are the guns you get. But like then you go into the next game and it's the same like kinds of guns. Like the loot pool changes like per season. But I feel like every single game should have like a wide array of guns and way more than like five. And if I get a really shitty gun and I pick it up off the floor versus like another guy, um I think that like too bad. Like I think I should start searching for like a better gun rather than know like, oh, okay, I've got a shitty gun and he probably has the same shitty gun too, so we're gonna have a shitty fight. Like like that doesn't sound fun to me. So I don't really like that. Um what else did I want to talk about? I think RuneScape did this really well. RuneScape's an MMORPG and they have a new event every single season. And actually it comes with a new quest every single season too, and I think they did a great job of that. But I think they also have a team that's like continuously improving the base content, and that's been frustrating for me because I feel like I want to advocate two different things here. The first thing I want to advocate is like having seasonal content, and the second thing, which is kind of contradictory in some ways, is having content that's going to not be seasonal, but it's going to just stick around for time after time. And I think that with the tools we have today, we could create some sort of generic seasonal content that's always available. So, for example, when I worked on the hot drop locations for the Christmas trees, I think that totally could have been reused for Easter or something else of like, okay, and who's to say they're not going to do this, right? I don't know. But I'll pick Valentine's Day because that already happened. For Valentine's Day, maybe they have a big heart or something. I don't know, and like that's where you drop, and it's the same exact thing, but it's a reskin tree. And I think there was some sentiment that like, oh, the community is like not gonna like that because they're gonna know it's just a reskin. Like that's not enough effort to put something out. But in my opinion, I'd rather something goes out even if it's just like for Valentine's Day weekend, oh, there's a cool event happening for 3 days. And yeah, it's a repeat of a previous event, but it's like, it's something, right? Because otherwise, nothing is changing. And I think that's what's so frustrating. It's like, besides, you have like these huge events where like, oh, Summer of Action, Rambo's in the game, and there's Nakatomi Tower for Bruce Willis. And then it's like, there's a fallow period where like now all the events are gone. And I think like I think that was just badly done. Like I think we should have done something where it's like, oh, we create something compelling about Nakatomi Tower, and like now they're here for the rest of the season, and like there's always going to be like some bots there that you can go and fight with, or something like that. Like you add something onto the cake, and then it's there for the rest of the time. I think I would have much appreciated that. And so I feel like something like the Christmas event, if you could just have like, oh, every holiday there's going to be a hot drop, and it's simple as that. But then we add the gnomes that are hidden, right? Okay, so the gnomes are hidden. That's interesting. Well, what if using the same system we have the Easter eggs that are hidden, and you have to go find the Easter eggs, like something like that. I feel like it could be done, and I don't think the engineering manpower is that high to do it because again, you're building on your past successes. You're just reusing the content. I don't think there's enough content reuse to say it again in brevity. The other thing is like, and this is something big. I think that there needs to be more emergent gameplay experiences within a battle royale experience. So I think that's something that Fortnite has done really well, where you can go over to this area and you can go fishing, and the fishing is not vestigial. It's not like useless. When you do a fishing and you succeed, you get some buff, right? I think in that case you get some shields. So maybe you can get some armor plates as the result of like doing a little mini game or something of that sort. But there's a number of mini games that I think would be a perfect fit for Warzone. In particular, I've noticed that a lot of people on Reddit have posted, time trials of like how fast they could race around the map. I 1,000,000% think that's a no-brainer that we should have that in Warzone. Where like if you drive past maybe some goalpost flags in a car, it'll start a timer ticking and it'll give you a certain amount of time to get around the map, in order to complete a circuit. And then maybe if you get it, there's a leaderboard that shows you globally how well you've did. And maybe there's even some sort of buff where you might get some nice armor plates or something. I don't know, or maybe a really nice gun if you complete that event. But I was disappointed to see that there wasn't more of that. I mean, there isn't any of it, frankly. There's nothing to do except for kill people in the game, which I think is the core part of the game, and I think that's important. But I think also, thinking of this from a perspective like Bartle taxonomy, I think it's important that like you meet different players for different kinds of gameplay. There's a lot of people who are playing Call of Duty just because that's the game that they play and they want to socialize with their friends. Like that's the core reason they're there. And I think there should be more opportunities for you to create cool moments in the game. Like I don't think there's enough of that happening other than, oh, what if I fight this guy with only snipers or I fight him with only knives or something. Like I don't think there's enough flexibility for there to be unique player stories that players can engage with and walk away from it like, oh, I was in the middle of a race and then I got attacked by a team, but I was able to still, come out on top because I went to the fishing and I fished out something cool. Like I feel like there's a way less like there's a smaller breadth of like player stories with respect to like how many things they could do, because like the verb set of like a player is pretty small in this game, and I feel like it deserves to be much larger. So that's a note. The other so that was just time trials, right? Like running. I also think golf could be a really good fit for this game. Um, like just like give them a weapon where you can golf, and then just like because I'm thinking there's a really robust driving system in the game and flying system. So I think you could put mini games on top of that because they already exist. Like I don't think there's a huge engineering overhead for that. Whereas like fishing would be a whole new thing. And I don't think that would really fit the milsim genre. But I think driving and flying totally would. And I think even something like golf, if it was like something like very physics based, like it's relying on the physics systems that are already in place, I think that could be a big success. Or maybe zombies too. Like maybe there's a way to get that to work. I'm not sure. But I was disappointed that there wasn't more emergent experiences like that. That's definitely where I would be putting my creative efforts if I was, creative director for a day or something like that. That's kind of my main difference there. Um, there's a bunch of other stuff I could talk about. Let me just jump to this point, though. I wanted to talk about the community engagement. So I would say that generally the team has improved a tremendous amount. There was some strategic hires on the community management front, during my tenure with respect to like getting the word out about what are we doing. And I think that's very important with the live service game is communicating back and forth between the player base. But I think that one of the things that this team could work on more is listening. versus talking. So I think this team is actually doing a tremendously great job at getting the word out and creating patch notes that are concise and detailed so that I mean, I see creators, right, like Jay God or some of these other big influential creators, they'll pull up the patch notes and they'll go through it line by line, and they'll be like, oh, okay, this is what they changed, this is how it's going to impact the play style, and they'll give their 2 cents about it. And I mean, when a creator is referencing that sheet specifically, it's been a big success, right? Because that's what they're referring to. So I think they've done a really great job of doing that. The talking side, right? That information output. But I think they've done a relatively poor job of information input. I don't think there's enough forums where people are having conversations with the developers, and the developers are taking that feedback and saying, "Hey, we hear you." I don't think that's happening enough. I think RuneScape actually is another live service game that has done this really well, where they will have like devs on the horn, and you'll be able to like ask them questions, and I think they do that really well. I think id Software has done that really well, where they'll have their creative director do a video chat with some smaller creators, and he will play the game with them. And I think that would be incredible. I think this is such an easy win for Warzone. Two things. If I was community manager for a day, here's what I'd do for them. I would say, let's make a Warzone Twitch channel and let's promote it so that it becomes a good Twitch channel. And I think we should feature like a creator of the week. So you take a small time creator who is maybe still building his audience, but who loves the game and who's good at the game, and you feature him, right? And so that person, him or her, or their, or whatever pronoun they use, I guess, they will go onto Twitch and they will play the game in front of everybody, and and they'll be the official Warzone channel. And maybe once a week, you have a creative director or a technical director or some lead, somebody with PR training, go on to the stream and join their squad. So the creative director and the streamer will fight the bad guys together. They team up, and during that time, they have a discussion where they talk about the game. They talk about what they're working on. That's public, and they work about what feedback the team would like to see, and they say, hey, I'm going to bring that back to the team, right? Obviously, you know how it is with development. You can't talk about stuff that you're currently working on, because then, people could say that you lied about the product and stuff. And I think CD Projekt Red is still in a lawsuit about, some mistakes that they made there in advertising something that wasn't accurate, right? But that doesn't mean to say you can't talk at all, right? And I think that shouldn't be construed, right? I think there's a lot of things that the developers could say to say, hey, we're looking into that, or hey, we're gonna investigate this. There's a lot that could be said there, because I think ultimately a lot of the smaller community members, people who aren't huge Twitch streamers, they feel unheard, and they feel like the community management has not done a good job of like taking their ideas as input. So I there's some feedback there, and I think that's what I'd do differently. I'd have like I try to like sponsor some of those creators in order to like build them up so that they could help benefit the community. So those are just some thoughts. Yeah, I think that's mostly it. There's a lot more to talk about, and I'm sure I'm gonna think as soon as I push, stop recording on this video, of like a million other things I'd like to discuss. But in 45 minutes, I think I've summarized some of my main points of what it was like. I guess to underscore, it's been a really privileged time working there. I really love the teammates I was able to collaborate with, and honestly, there was never a time that I felt like somebody didn't have the best interests of the game at heart. I think people care very deeply about this game, and they want it to succeed. And it's a really great environment that Raven has fostered. Now I say that while they're embroiled in some serious lawsuits with obviously somebody who used to work at Activision Blizzard killed themselves because they were harassed by their coworkers, their lead actually, right? So that person is now dead, which is pretty serious. And there's a lot of other serious issues. Like I know there's some labor situation going on there. Now I'll say, of all those weren't the reasons why I left the studio, but I'll say that it's not a reason why I left, but it's a reason not to stay for sure. I think there's certainly some negative stuff happening there, and And I'm very sorry to hear that. I did sit down on some of the court proceedings for the labor board relations concerning the incentive, the interest to unionize for some of the QA members. And I did feel like the studio leadership did inaccurately portray the role of QA historically as it's been within our studio. In the last 2 years that I've seen, I felt like there were statements made that did not reflect the truth. So that was definitely frustrating, and I'm very unhappy with how that's unfolding. But that wasn't my reason for leaving. I guess to clarify that, the main reason why I'm leaving this opportunity and looking for a new opportunity is because I wanted to focus a little bit more on C++ skills. So maybe the way I could explain this is like there's different languages in coding. So you can think, okay, languages like English and French and German, I guess. And the kind of language that I worked on in this game was not the kind of language that I wanted to build my career on top of. So this game uses a lot of something called a scripting language, and I wanted to do a little bit more of something called a programming language. So I wanted to do more of what might be called coding and less of what might be called scripting. So that's basically the root of what I was interested in. And then also, I was also there wasn't really a clear path for promotion at the studio. I spoke to my lead and I asked him, what would the timeline look like for me to get promoted? And he said basically there is no timeline. Certainly not within this year for you to get promoted. Basically, there's a line of people who need to get promoted before you, and that just didn't sound very merit based. Because it basically, he said, it's based on when you arrived and then how much time you've spent at the studio. So if somebody else has spent more time as an associate, then they're going to get the promotion before you do. And so that didn't strike me as merit based. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not all right. If I'm not going to get promoted here, I'll just look elsewhere. So that's ultimately what was my main motivation for seeking new opportunities. And I'm really excited about my next job, and I'm excited to share with you what that's going to be like. But that'll be for another video. Um, so is there any other things I want to talk about with Warzone? Yeah, so I mean, it honestly, one of my favorite games of Battle Royale, still one of my favorite games today. I think there's a lot of things I'd change about the team if I had the power to do so. And there was a lot of things which I did work to try and change while I was there. I think I had a lot of success in some areas, and I think in some areas I failed. But I'm proud of the work I did there, and I'm really proud of the team. I think there's a lot to look forward to. I think it has a very bright future, and I think the future of like the COD franchise and just Warzone in general as like I guess a franchise is really bright. I'm really excited about what they make next, and I definitely am gonna stay a fan of the game and keep playing it to the future. I'm really excited about some of the upcoming projects I got a sneak peek into, and I'd love to see how they turn out. And yeah, I feel so grateful. It was a great team. It made me so happy to work there. And it's definitely a studio which I could say I can see myself coming back there one day. Once I have the skills that I need to succeed on the coding front. I think this is a team that I'd love to return to, and I'd love to make a difference. And obviously it's a small industry, so or you may have heard that before, but like people will say like, oh, it's a small industry. When you start working on a game, it's likely you might team up with those guys again on some other game. And I think that's definitely the case. So I'm sure I'll see, familiar faces again. Um, but yeah, I really enjoyed my time there. So if there's any questions you have, please just put them in the comments section below, and I'd be happy to answer them. Um, of course, as always, I can't talk about anything that's secret or anything that has not yet been released. But other than that, if it's just like work questions or things like that, I'd be happy to answer them. Um, if you're interested in pursuing a role in game development, then I wrote a free guide called Get Into Game Dev. I'm still working on it, but it's basically a book similar to cracking the coding interview to help you pass a software engineering interview if you do want to get a job in game development. It's free, totally free. Yeah, I'll link it below, I guess. So you could check that out if you're interested in pursuing that as a career. Is there anything else I should talk about? Not really. There's nothing really else on my mind. It's a good game. It's a good team. And would I recommend working there? Absolutely. Yeah. I think it'd be a privilege to work on that team again. I think it's a really good group of people, and I think as I said before, I think they're going to make a lot more awesome stuff in the future. All right, so I think that's all I have to say. Goodbye. Have a great day.